For 32 years, my husband sent $500 every single month to his sister in Chicago. $500 that came out of our joint account, regular as clockwork, on the 15th of every month. That's $192,000 over the course of our marriage. Nearly $200,000 sent to a woman I'd never met, never spoken to, never even seen a photograph of. And when I finally did meet her, when I showed up at the address on those money orders after my husband's sudden death, I discovered that everything I thought I knew about my marriage was not what it seemed. My name is Patricia, though most people call me Patty. I'm 71 years old, a grandmother of 6, and 3 months ago I buried my husband of 32 years. Thomas was a good man, or at least I thought he was. He worked hard as an electrician, never missed a day, and came home every evening smelling like wire and sweat. He coached our son's baseball team, walked our daughter down the aisle, and was there for every birthday and holiday. He seemed like the most dependable, straightforward man you could imagine. But everyone has secrets. And Thomas's secret was a woman in Chicago named Diane, his sister, who wasn't his sister at all. Before I tell you what I discovered when I knocked on Diane's door, before I explain how my entire life changed in the span of a single conversation, I need you to do something for me. Subscribe to Family Tales right now. Hit that button, because what I'm about to tell you will make you question everything you think you know about the people closest to you. This is a story about lies, about the masks people wear, about discovering that the person sleeping beside you for 3 decades might be a complete stranger. Let me take you back to the beginning, to 1991, when I first met Thomas Walker in Savannah, Georgia. I was 39 years old, divorced with 2 young children. Emma was 8, and Danny was 6. My first marriage had ended badly. My ex-husband, Richard, had been a charmer who turned out to be a gambler, draining our savings on horse races and poker games until there was nothing left but debt and broken promises. After the divorce, I was working 2 jobs, waitressing during the day, cleaning offices at night, just trying to keep my kids fed and a roof over our heads. Thomas came into the diner where I worked one Tuesday morning. He sat at the counter, ordered coffee and scrambled eggs, and left a $20 tip on a $7 meal. When I tried to give some of it back, he smiled and said, "You look like you could use it." That smile. God, that smile made him look like the kindest man in the world. He started coming in every Tuesday morning. We'd chat while I refilled his coffee, small talk at first, about the weather and the news. Then he started asking about my life. Not in a pushy way, just genuine interest. He listened when I talked about my kids, about the struggles of being a single mom, about my dreams of maybe going back to school someday. After about 2 months of these Tuesday morning conversations, he asked me out properly. "Would you like to have dinner with me? Somewhere nice, where someone else does the serving for a change?" I was hesitant. After Richard, I didn't trust my judgment with men anymore. But there was something so solid about Thomas, so reliable. He wasn't flashy or smooth-talking. He was just steady. That first date turned into a second, then a third. Thomas was patient with my kids, never trying too hard or pushing himself into their lives too fast. He'd bring Danny baseball cards and spend hours talking to Emma about her drawings. Within 6 months, I was in love with him. Within a year, we were married. It was a small ceremony at the courthouse. Thomas didn't have much family, and neither did I. His parents had both passed away years earlier, and he mentioned having a sister in Chicago, but she couldn't make it to the wedding. He showed me a card she'd sent. "Congratulations to my little brother, finally settling down. Sorry I can't be there. Love, Diane." I thought it was odd that she couldn't come to her only brother's wedding, but Thomas explained that she had serious health issues that made travel difficult. She's got a condition, muscular dystrophy, that's been getting worse over the years. She can barely leave her apartment anymore. But she's happy for us. "Maybe we could visit her sometime," I suggested. "Take a trip to Chicago?" Thomas's expression shifted. Something flickered across his face, too quick for me to identify. "Maybe someday. But Diane's pretty private about her condition. She doesn't like people seeing her struggle." I let it drop. After all, I had my own complicated family situation, and I understood that not every relationship needed to be close or constant. Life with Thomas was good. Better than good. It was stable in a way I'd never experienced. We bought a modest house in a quiet neighborhood. He adopted Emma and Danny legally, giving them his last name. They called him Dad, within 2 years. We had enough money to live comfortably, not lavishly, but we never struggled the way I had as a single mother. The first time I noticed the money transfers to Diane was about 3 months after we got married. I was balancing our checkbook. Yes, I still did it the old-fashioned way with a ledger, and I saw a $500 withdrawal marked Diane. When Thomas came home that evening, I asked him about it casually. "Honey, I saw you sent money to your sister. Is everything okay?" He didn't hesitate. "Oh yeah, I send her some money every month to help with her medical expenses. Her disability payments don't cover everything she needs: medications, physical therapy, home health aides. I've been doing it for years, even before I met you. I should have mentioned it. Is that a problem?" Was it a problem? $500 was a lot of money for us, about 15% of Thomas's monthly income. But it was for his sick sister. What kind of person would I be if I objected to him helping his only sibling? "No, of course it's not a problem," I said. "I think it's wonderful that you take care of her. Does she need more? Maybe I could pick up some extra shifts." No. Thomas put his arm around me. "500 is exactly what she needs. You're already working hard enough. This is just something I do for family, you know?" And that was that. Every month, $500 went to Diane in Chicago. It became part of our budget, as regular as the mortgage payment or the electric bill. Over the years, I'd occasionally ask about Diane. How was she feeling? Was her condition getting worse? Did she need us to visit? Thomas's answers were always vague but seemed reasonable. She was stable, managing her condition, preferred not to have visitors because she was self-conscious about her physical limitations. Maybe we could at least talk on the phone? I suggested once, about 5 years into our marriage. I'd love to get to know her, even if we can't visit in person. Thomas shook his head. Her speech is affected by the muscular dystrophy now. Talking on the phone exhausts her. She communicates mostly through letters. Then let's write to her. I could send cards, pictures of the kids. She's a very private person, Patty. She doesn't really like getting mail from people she doesn't know. But I'll mention it to her in my next letter. He never did, or if he did, Diane apparently declined. And I let it go because Thomas was such a good husband and father in every other way that it seemed petty to push about this one thing. Emma and Danny grew up. Emma went to college, became a teacher, got married, and had 3 kids of her own. Danny joined the army, served 2 tours overseas, came home and became a firefighter, got married, and had 3 children too. Thomas was there for all of it. Every graduation, every wedding, every grandchild's birth. He was the picture of a devoted family man. But every month, without fail, $500 went to Chicago. I stopped thinking about it as unusual after a while. It just became part of our life. Thomas has a sister with medical needs, and he supports her financially. That's what good people do for family. Except she wasn't his sister. 3 months ago, Thomas had a heart attack while working on a job site. Massive coronary. The paramedics said he was probably dead before he hit the ground. He was 68 years old. We'd been talking about retirement, about traveling, about maybe buying an RV and seeing the country. And then he was just gone. The funeral was well attended. Thomas had been active in our community, coached Little League for years, volunteered with Habitat for Humanity, was part of the Veterans Support Group even though he'd never served himself. People kept telling me what a good man he was, how lucky I was to have had him for so long. I sat through it all in a fog, accepting condolences, trying to be strong for Emma and Danny and the grandkids. And in the back of my mind I kept thinking, I should contact Diane. She should know her brother died. She should have the chance to attend his funeral. After the service, I went through Thomas's desk looking for contact information for Diane. I'd never needed it before. Thomas handled all communication with her, but surely he had a phone number or an address somewhere. I found a small address book in the bottom drawer, the kind with alphabetical tabs. Under D was a single entry. Diane Martinez, 2847, North Kimball Avenue, Apartment 3B, Chicago, Illinois. There was no phone number, which struck me as odd. In 32 years, had Thomas never needed to call his sister in an emergency? But then again, he'd always said phone calls exhausted her. I decided to write her a letter. I spent hours drafting it, trying to find the right words to tell a woman I'd never met that her brother had passed away. I told her about the funeral she'd missed, about how loved Thomas had been in our community, about how much I wished I'd had the chance to meet her over the years. I included my phone number and email address, inviting her to contact me anytime. 2 weeks passed with no response. Then 3 weeks. A month. Emma came over for coffee one Saturday morning. She'd noticed I was struggling, barely eating, not sleeping well, spending hours staring at nothing. She sat across from me at the kitchen table and took my hands. "Mom, I'm worried about you. You're not dealing with Dad's death. You're just existing." "I'm fine, honey. I just need time." "No, you need to start living again. When's the last time you left this house except to go to the grocery store?" She was right, of course. I'd been in a holding pattern since Thomas died, waiting for, I didn't even know what. "Have you heard from Aunt Diane?" Emma asked. "Did she ever respond to your letter?" "No. Nothing." Emma frowned. "That seems strange. I mean, I know we never met her, but you'd think she'd at least acknowledge that her brother died. Maybe the letter got lost. Or maybe she's too sick to respond. Or maybe..." I stopped, a thought occurring to me for the first time. "Emma, do you think there's a chance Diane died too? Maybe years ago, and your father kept sending money to an empty apartment." "That would be incredibly sad," Emma said. "But also, wouldn't the money orders bounce if there was no one to cash them?" She was right again. Someone had been cashing those checks every month for 32 years. "Mom," Emma said carefully, "have you ever thought about just going there? Flying to Chicago and knocking on Diane's door? You have her address." I hadn't thought about it, but once Emma said it, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Why shouldn't I go? I deserved to meet the woman my husband had supported for 3 decades. I deserved to see where nearly $200,000 of our money had gone. I deserved answers. "Would you come with me?" I asked Emma. "Of course." A week later, Emma and I were on a plane to Chicago. Danny wanted to come too, but he couldn't get time off work, so it was just the 2 of us. We landed at O'Hare, rented a car, and drove to an area called Logan Square, where the address on the money orders was located. 2847 North Kimball Avenue was a 3-story brownstone that had been converted into apartments. It looked well maintained, with flower boxes in the windows and a freshly painted door. We found apartment 3B on the 3rd floor, and I stood in front of it for a full minute before I could make myself knock. "It's okay, Mom," Emma said, squeezing my hand. "Whatever we find out, we'll handle it together." I knocked. 3 firm knocks that sounded impossibly loud in the quiet hallway. Footsteps approached from inside. The door opened. The woman standing there was probably in her mid-60s, with short gray hair and sharp green eyes. She was wearing jeans and a University of Chicago sweatshirt. She looked healthy, strong, nothing like someone with advanced muscular dystrophy. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I'm looking for Diane Martinez," I said, my voice shaking. "That's me. I'm Patricia Walker, Thomas Walker's wife. I wrote you a letter about a month ago, about Thomas passing away." Diane's face went pale. She gripped the doorframe. "Thomas is dead." "Yes. He had a heart attack 3 months ago. Didn't you get my letter?" She looked genuinely shocked and confused. "I got a letter, but I thought it was a scam. People send fake death notices sometimes trying to get information or money. I threw it away without reading it all the way through. Thomas is really dead." "Yes." Tears were streaming down my face now. "He died in March. I'm so sorry you didn't know. I should have tried harder to reach you." "Come in," Diane said abruptly, stepping back from the door. "Please, both of you. Come in." Emma and I entered the apartment. It was modest but comfortable. A small living room with a couch and TV, a tiny kitchen visible through an archway, a hallway that presumably led to a bedroom and bathroom. The walls were covered with photographs, and not one of them featured Thomas. I looked around at the dozens of photos, Diane with various people at different ages, graduation pictures, vacation shots, holiday gatherings, and Thomas wasn't in a single one of them. I don't understand, I said, turning to Diane. You're his sister. Where are the family photos? Where are the pictures of you two growing up together? Diane's expression was strange, a mixture of confusion, sadness, and something else I couldn't identify. She gestured for us to sit on the couch while she took the armchair across from us. Mrs. Walker, she said carefully, I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding. Thomas and I, we weren't brother and sister. The room tilted. Emma grabbed my arm to steady me. What do you mean you weren't brother and sister? My voice came out as barely a whisper. He sent you money every month for 32 years. He said you were his sister, that you had muscular dystrophy, that he was helping with your medical expenses. I don't have muscular dystrophy, Diane interrupted gently. I am perfectly healthy. I've never had any major medical issues in my life. Then who are you? Emma demanded. Why was our father sending you $500 every single month? Diane took a deep breath. I think I need to tell you the whole story. But first, I need to know, did Thomas ever mention anything about his time in Chicago? Before he moved to Georgia? No, I said. He said he grew up in Kentucky. He never mentioned living in Chicago. He lied about a lot of things then. Diane stood up and walked to a shelf, pulling down a photo album. She brought it back and opened it to a specific page, showing me a picture of a much younger Diane, maybe 25 years old, standing next to a young man who was unmistakably Thomas. They were standing in front of what looked like a church, both dressed formally. Diane was wearing a white dress and holding a bouquet. Thomas had his arm around her waist. We were married, Diane said quietly. Thomas and I were married for 8 years. The world stopped. Emma's hand tightened on my arm. I stared at the photograph, at my husband's young face smiling at the camera, at the wedding ring on his finger. That's impossible. I heard myself say. He would have told me. You can't just hide an entire marriage. He didn't just hide a marriage, Diane said, her voice heavy with old sadness. He hid something much bigger than that. Before she could continue, before she could shatter what remained of my understanding of my life with Thomas, Emma's phone rang. She looked at the screen and her face went white. Mom, it's Danny. It's an emergency. She answered, and I watched her expression shift from confusion to horror. When she hung up, she looked at me with tears in her eyes. Mom, there's something you need to know. Danny just got a call from an attorney. About Dad's will. There's another wife. In Texas. Dad had another wife. The room spun. I couldn't breathe. Emma was talking, but I couldn't hear her over the roaring in my ears. Diane was saying something too, standing up, reaching for me as I fell forward off the couch into darkness. Now I know what you're thinking. You're sitting there wondering how the story could possibly get worse. How many more secrets one man could keep. Before I tell you the rest, before I explain what I learned about Thomas's 3 lives, his 3 families, his 32 years of elaborate lies, I need you to subscribe to Family Tales if you haven't already. Because this story goes places you won't believe, and you're going to want to see how it all unfolds. Hit that subscribe button now. I'll wait. When I came to, I was lying on Diane's couch with a cold compress on my forehead. Emma was kneeling beside me, her face wet with tears. Diane was on the phone in the kitchen, speaking in low, urgent tones. Mom, just breathe, Emma was saying. Slow breaths. That's it. 3 wives. I managed to croak. How is that possible? I don't know, but Danny's talking to the attorney now. Apparently, Dad had a whole other family in Texas. A wife and 2 kids. Diane came back into the room, her face grim. I just got off the phone with someone I should have called years ago. Patricia, Emma, this is going to be difficult to hear, but you deserve the truth. All of it. She sat down and pulled out another photo from the album. This one showing Thomas with 2 small children, a boy and a girl, maybe 4 and 6 years old. These are Thomas's children from his marriage to me, Michael and Sarah. They're in their 40s now. I stared at the photo. My husband had children I didn't know about. Children who would be older than Emma and Danny. Thomas and I met in Chicago in 1975, Diane began. We were both young, working entry-level jobs, trying to make our way in the world. He was charming, ambitious, full of big dreams about the life we'd build together. We got married in 1976 at City Hall. My parents weren't thrilled about it, thought we were too young, but we didn't care. We were in love. She paused, her fingers tracing the edge of the photograph. Michael was born in 1978, Sarah in 1980. Thomas was working as an electrician's apprentice, and I was working as a secretary. Money was tight, but we were happy. At least I thought we were. What happened? Emma asked. In 1984, Thomas told me he'd been offered a big job in Florida. Great pay, opportunities for advancement, a chance to really build a career. He said he needed to go down there alone first, get established, find us a place to live. Then he'd send for me and the kids. It made sense. People did that kind of thing all the time back then. So I said okay. But he never sent for you, I said, already knowing the answer. Oh, he sent money. Every month, $500 appeared in our joint bank account like clockwork. And letters. Every few weeks, a letter talking about how hard he was working, how he was looking for the perfect house for us, how it was taking longer than expected but he'd send for us soon. The kids would write him letters back, send drawings and report cards. He'd respond with encouraging notes about how proud he was of them. $500 a month, I said numbly. The same amount he was sending you when he was married to me. Diane nodded. For years, it was our lifeline. It kept us afloat while I worked and raised 2 kids alone, waiting for Thomas to send for us. But the call never came. The years passed. Michael started asking when Dad was coming home. Sarah barely remembered him, and I started to suspect something was wrong. So what did you do? In 1990, I finally got suspicious enough to hire a private investigator. Spent money I couldn't afford, but I needed to know the truth. And the investigator found him, living in Savannah, Georgia, not Florida. Married to you. Raising your kids as his own. The words hit me like physical blows. While Thomas and I were dating, getting married, building our life together, he already had a wife and 2 children waiting for him in Chicago. Why didn't you confront him? Emma asked, her voice sharp. Why didn't you call the police? That's bigamy. That's illegal. I did confront him, Diane said. I called the number the investigator had found, your home number, Patricia, and Thomas answered. I told him I knew everything, that he was living a double life, that what he was doing was illegal and wrong. And do you know what he said? I shook my head, unable to speak. He said, Diane, please. I'll keep sending the money. I'll increase it if you need me to. But please don't tell Patricia. Please don't destroy what I've built here. Those kids, Danny and Emma, they're calling me Dad. They need me. And Patricia needs me. They all need me to be who I've told them I am. If you expose me, you'll destroy their lives, not just mine. And you believed him? Emma's voice was incredulous. Not entirely. But he made me a deal. He'd keep sending money, not just $500 but $1,000 a month. He'd put both Michael and Sarah through college, pay for everything they needed. In exchange, I wouldn't expose him. I wouldn't ruin the life he'd built with his new family. So you became his accomplice, I said, anger finally cutting through the shock. You let him get away with it. You let him lie to me for 32 more years. I did, Diane admitted, tears streaming down her face now. And I've regretted it every single day since. But I was a single mother with 2 kids and a dead-end job. The economy was terrible. I was barely surviving. And Thomas was offering me a lifeline. $1,000 a month was enough to actually live on, not just scrape by. It was enough to give my kids a decent life. But he only sent you $500. I interjected. At least, that's what came out of our bank account. Diane looked confused. No, it was $1,000. Every month, like clockwork. $1,000. Emma and I looked at each other. If Thomas was sending $1,000 to Diane, but only $500 was coming out of our account, where was the other $500 coming from? The wife in Texas, Emma said slowly. He was probably taking $500 from her account too. Oh my God, Diane whispered. There really is another one? I thought maybe you'd gotten confused, that you'd made a mistake. No mistake, Emma said grimly. She'd been texting with Danny while Diane was telling her story. Danny just sent me details from the attorney. Dad was married to a woman named Linda Torres in San Antonio. They got married in 1998. She has 2 kids with him, twins born in 2000. The attorney only found out about us because Dad apparently had a proper will that mentioned all 3 families. All 3 families. I repeated, the words feeling surreal. How did he manage it? How did one man maintain 3 entirely separate lives? He traveled for work, Diane said quietly. That's what he told me back when we were still together. That he had to travel constantly for jobs. I imagine he told you the same thing. I nodded. Thomas was often away for work. A week here, a few days there, sometimes longer for bigger jobs. I'd never questioned it. Electricians do travel for work, especially for commercial projects or emergency repairs. He must have set up a rotation, Emma said, working it through. A week with us in Georgia, then a week in Chicago with his first family, then a week in Texas with his third family, then back to Georgia. Over and over year after year. But his kids in Chicago would be adults now, I pointed out. Michael and Sarah would be in their 40s. Was he still visiting them? No, Diane said. Once they turned 18 and went off to college, which he did pay for, I'll give him that, his visits became less frequent. Just a few times a year, holidays mostly. But the money never stopped. Always $1,000, always on time. Did they know? I asked. Your children. Did they know their father was living a double life? A triple life? Diane's face crumpled. They found out when they were teenagers. Michael discovered some mail that was addressed to Thomas at a P.O. box. Mail from Georgia, with your name on it. He confronted me and I told them the truth. That their father had another family, that he'd chosen to build a life with someone else, but he was still supporting us financially. How did they react? Michael was angry. He refused to see Thomas anymore, refused to take his money for college. He put himself through school with loans and work. Sarah was more forgiving. She kept in touch with her father, accepted his help. But neither of them really had a relationship with him. He was more like a distant benefactor than a dad. I thought about Thomas with my children, with Emma and Danny. He'd been there for everything. Every parent-teacher conference, every sports game, every milestone. He'd walked Emma down the aisle. He'd helped Danny work through his PTSD after his tours in Afghanistan. He'd been a real father to them in every possible way, which meant he'd chosen us over his first family. He'd given us what he'd denied his older children, his presence, his time, his genuine involvement in their lives. I need to meet them, I said suddenly. Michael and Sarah. They deserve to know their father died. And I need to understand. I need to see the full picture of who Thomas was. Michael lives here in Chicago, Diane said. Sarah's in Milwaukee, about 2 hours away. I can call them if you want. But Patricia, I should warn you, Michael especially is still very angry about his father. This might not be the healing conversation you're hoping for. I don't care. I need to hear it. All of it. Diane made the calls. Sarah said she could drive down that evening. Michael said he'd come but made it clear he was only doing it as a courtesy to me, not out of any lingering feelings for his father. While we waited, Emma ordered food. None of us had eaten since breakfast, and we sat in Diane's small living room, 3 women connected by the lies of one man, trying to piece together the truth. Did he ever tell you why? I asked Diane. Why he left you and the kids? Why he built a second life instead of just getting divorced like a normal person? I asked him that once years ago. He said he felt trapped. That he'd gotten married too young, had kids too young, and he felt like his life was over before it had really begun. He said he loved me and the kids, but he couldn't be the person we needed him to be. He said leaving physically but staying connected financially was the only way he could handle it. That's not an explanation, that's an excuse, Emma said bitterly. Plenty of people feel trapped in their lives. They don't solve it by committing bigamy and fraud. I know. Believe me, I know. But Thomas always had a way of making his choices sound reasonable, even when they were anything but. What about the wife in Texas? I asked. Linda. Do we know anything about her? Emma checked her phone again. Danny's been emailing with the attorney. Apparently Linda is devastated. She had no idea about us either. Emma stood up, facing Michael squarely. You have every right to be angry. What our father did was unforgivable. But we didn't know. We're victims too. He lied to all of us. Did you wonder why you had no grandparents? Michael shot back. No aunts, no uncles, no cousins? No family photos from before you were born? Did none of that strike you as strange? Emma's face flushed. He said his parents were dead. He said he was estranged from his extended family. We believed him because he was our father and we trusted him. Just like you trusted him before he left. Michael's anger seemed to deflate slightly. He sank into a chair, his head in his hands. I know. I'm sorry. This isn't your fault. It's just a lot, Sarah finished for him. Finding out your father was leading 3 separate lives. Finding out he's dead, and you never got to confront him about any of it. Can I ask you something? I said to Michael. When did you last see your father? Christmas 4 years ago. Sarah invited him to dinner at her place. I went because she asked me to, not because I wanted to see him. He tried to make small talk, asked about my job, my girlfriend. Like we were casual acquaintances catching up, not father and son. I left before dessert. And you? I asked Sarah. I saw him about 6 months ago. He came up to Milwaukee for a visit. We had lunch, talked about my work. I'm a physical therapist. He seemed proud of me, asked about my life. But we didn't talk about anything real. We never did. It was always surface level, polite. The relationship I had with my father was basically a series of pleasant, but meaningless conversations punctuated by checks in the mail. Did he mention us? Emma asked. Me and my brother? His other family? Sarah and Michael exchanged glances. No, Sarah said. He never talked about you. Mom told us you existed, but Dad, it was like you were in a completely separate compartment of his life that he kept locked away when he was with us. Just like we were in a compartment locked away from you, I said. He was living in individual cells, moving from one to another, never letting them touch. How is that even possible? Emma asked. How do you maintain that level of deception for decades? How do you not slip up, not make a mistake? He did slip up, Diane said quietly. Small things over the years. Times when I'd call his cell phone, and he wouldn't answer for days. Times when the money would be late. Once he called me Patricia instead of Diane during a phone call. But I never pushed it because I was afraid of losing the financial support. And I think part of me didn't want to know how far the deception went. Did any of you know about Linda? I asked. The wife in Texas? Everyone shook their heads. That's news to us, Michael said. I guess he started that relationship in 1998? I would have been 20 years old. Sarah was 18. We were both in college by then. He must have figured he had enough distance from us that he could start another family. Another family he could actually be present for, Sarah added. Like yours. He wanted a do-over. He wanted to be the kind of father he hadn't been for us. The bitterness in her voice was unmistakable, and it cut through me. Thomas had been a good father to Emma and Danny. No, he'd been a great father. He'd been everything a father should be, supportive, involved, loving. And I was just now realizing that his excellence as a father to my children had come at the direct expense of his first children. I'm so sorry, I said to Michael and Sarah. I know those words don't mean much, but I'm truly sorry. If I had known, if there had been any way for me to know. We know, Michael said, his voice softer now. Like Emma said, you're a victim too. Hell, we're all victims. The only person who isn't a victim here is the one person who can't be held accountable anymore. Emma's phone buzzed. She looked at it and then at me. Danny set up a video call with the attorney and Linda Torres. They're ready whenever we are. Linda Torres, I repeated. Wife number 3. Should we do this now? Here. Might as well. Diane said. We're all together. We might as well face the whole truth at once. Diane set up her laptop on the coffee table, and we gathered around it, 3 wives for children from the first 2 marriages, all about to meet the 3rd family. Emma dialed into the video conference. The screen flickered to life, showing 2 windows. In one was a man in his 50s wearing a suit, presumably the attorney. In the other was a woman about my age with warm brown skin and dark hair pulled back in a bun. Her eyes were red from crying. Beside her were two young people in their early 20s. A young man and woman who looked like carbon copies of each other. "Hello everyone," the attorney said. "I'm James Whitmore, and I'm handling Thomas Walker's estate. I've gathered you all here because, as you've probably already discovered, Mr. Walker's situation is unprecedented in my 30 years of practice. Mrs. Torres, would you like to introduce yourself?" The woman on the screen nodded, wiping her eyes. "I'm Linda Torres. I was married to Thomas Walker for 25 years. These are my children, Marcus and Maria. They're twins, 23 years old." Her voice broke. "I thought I was his only wife. I thought we had a normal marriage." "We all thought that," I said gently. "I'm Patricia Walker. Well, I guess I don't know if I'm legally Patricia Walker or not anymore. This is my daughter Emma. Thomas and I were married for 32 years. And I'm Diane Martinez," Diane added. "I was married to Thomas from 1976 to, well, I guess technically we were never divorced, so I was married to him until his death. These are my children, Michael and Sarah." Linda's face went pale. 32 years? But we got married in 1998. That means he was already married to you, Patricia, when he married me. And he was still married to you, Diane, when he married both of us. "Apparently so," I said. "We're all still trying to piece this together ourselves." "How?" Linda asked, her voice rising. "How did he manage 3 families? We lived in San Antonio. He was there at least half the time. He had a job there, friends there. He coached Marcus's soccer team, for God's sake. How was he doing that while also being in Georgia and Chicago?" "He traveled for work," Marcus said, speaking for the first time. His voice was flat, shocked. "He was always traveling for work. Big electrical jobs all over the country. Sometimes he'd be gone for 2 weeks, then home for 2 weeks. We thought it was normal." "Same with us," Emma said. "He'd travel for work constantly. We thought it was just part of being an electrician, going where the jobs were." "But he wasn't just going where the jobs were," Michael said bitterly. "He was rotating between his 3 families, going wherever he was needed most, or whoever he felt like being with at the time." The attorney cleared his throat. "I've been reviewing Mr. Walker's financial records, and I can tell you that he was quite meticulous about keeping things separate. He had 3 different bank accounts, 3 different cell phones, 3 different sets of identification. He filed taxes separately in 3 different states using slightly different versions of his name. Thomas Walker in Georgia, Tom Walker in Illinois, and Thomas Walker Torres in Texas." "Walker Torres?" Linda gasped. "He hyphenated our names? He never told me that." "It was only on the Texas documents," the attorney explained. "Presumably to help keep his Texas life separate from his other lives. He also had 3 different social security numbers." "That's impossible," I said. "You can't just get multiple social security numbers." "You can if you're willing to commit identity fraud," the attorney replied. "Mr. Walker appears to have stolen the identities of deceased individuals and used them to build his multiple lives. This is, of course, highly illegal, and there will be consequences." "What kind of consequences?" Sarah asked. "He's dead. You can't prosecute a dead man." "No, but his estate can be held liable for the fraud. Any assets he had may need to be used to settle debts or penalties. Which brings me to the will." Mr. Whitmore pulled up a document on his screen. Thomas Walker left a will. Actually, he left 3 wills, one in each state, each naming a different wife as the primary beneficiary. However, since bigamy is illegal and the subsequent marriages are therefore invalid, only the first marriage is legally recognized. All eyes turned to Diane. "That means," the attorney continued, "that legally speaking, Diane Martinez is Thomas Walker's widow and the sole beneficiary of his estate. The marriages to Patricia Walker and Linda Torres are legally void." The room went silent. I felt like I'd been slapped. 32 years of marriage, and legally I'd never been married at all? "How much?" Michael asked. "How much is the estate worth?" "That's complicated," Mr. Whitmore said. Mr. Walker owned property in all 3 states, a house in Savannah, a house in San Antonio, and a rental property in Chicago. He had multiple bank accounts, retirement funds, life insurance policies. In total, the estate is worth approximately $1.2 million. Gasps around the room. I'd had no idea Thomas had accumulated that much. We'd always lived modestly. How had he saved over $1 million while supporting 3 families? However, the attorney continued, there are significant complications. First, 2 of the properties, the homes in Savannah and San Antonio, have mortgages in the names of women who weren't legally married to Mr. Walker. Patricia and Linda, you both co-signed on your mortgages thinking you were his legal wives, but since those marriages were invalid, your legal status regarding those properties is unclear. Are you saying I might lose my house? Linda asked, panic in her voice. The house I've lived in for 24 years? The house I've been paying the mortgage on. I'm saying it's complicated and will likely require litigation to sort out. The same applies to bank accounts that were held jointly with Patricia and Linda. Without legal marriage, your claims to those assets may not hold up in court. This is insane, Emma said. You're telling us that because our father was a bigamist and a fraud, my mother and Linda might lose everything they've built? I'm telling you that the law is clear on bigamy. Subsequent marriages are void, which means the financial entanglements of those marriages are legally questionable. Now, there are arguments that can be made about equitable division and good faith marriage, but those would need to be argued in court. What about the life insurance? I asked. Thomas had a life insurance policy. I've been waiting for that to come through to help pay for funeral expenses and bills. There were 3 life insurance policies, the attorney said. One naming each of you as the beneficiary. However, given that only one marriage was legal, only Diane has a clear legal right to a life insurance payout. The other 2 policies will likely be contested. So let me get this straight, Michael said, his voice hard. My mother, who Thomas abandoned 40 years ago, who he lied to and manipulated, who he paid off to keep quiet. She's now legally entitled to everything he had? While these other women, who also thought they were his legal wives, might lose their homes and their financial security. In the simplest terms, yes. Though I expect all parties will contest this, and the litigation could take years. I looked at Diane. She looked as horrified as I felt. I don't want this, Diane said. I don't want to be the reason these women lose their homes. I didn't even want to be married to Thomas anymore. If I'd known he was still legally my husband, I would have filed for divorce decades ago. Can she do that? Sarah asked. Can Mom just give up her claim? Let Patricia and Linda have their shares. She can, but it's complicated. Without legal marriage, dividing assets equally becomes difficult. We'd essentially be looking at Diane voluntarily giving away portions of her inheritance, which would have tax implications and other complications. I don't care about the complications, Diane said firmly. I'm not going to let these women become homeless, because Thomas was a liar. We'll figure it out. Mom, wait, Michael said. Think about this. Dad left us. He chose them over us. Why should you give up what's legally yours? Because it's the right thing to do, Diane snapped. Because unlike your father, I actually have a conscience. These women didn't know any more than I did. They're victims just like I was. But you were his first victim, Michael pressed. You have 2 kids he abandoned. You struggled for years while he was off building other families. You deserve this money more than anyone. No one deserves this money, Sarah interjected. This whole situation is a nightmare. Fighting over Dad's money won't bring him back or make what he did any better. If Mom wants to share the estate, we should support her. Easy for you to say, Michael shot back. You're not the one who had to watch Mom work 3 jobs to keep us fed while Dad was off playing Father of the Year to someone else's kids. That's not fair, Emma started. None of this is fair, Michael shouted. That's the whole point. Nothing about this situation is fair to anyone. The video call descended into chaos. Everyone talking over each other, voices raised, decades of pain and resentment spilling out. Marcus and Maria sat in stunned silence, looking like they wished they could disappear. Linda was crying. Mr. Whitmore was trying to restore order and failing. Finally, I stood up. Stop! I shouted, loud enough to cut through the noise. Everyone went quiet, staring at me. This is exactly what Thomas wanted, I said, my voice shaking with anger. He wanted us divided. He wanted us fighting over scraps while he got to avoid all consequences by being dead. Well, I won't do it. I won't fight with Diane or Linda. I won't fight with these kids who are just as much victims as anyone. We're going to figure this out like adults, and we're going to do it without tearing each other apart. How? Michael asked. How do we figure this out when the law says only my mother has any rights to anything? We start with the truth, I said. All of it. Mr. Whitmore, I need you to pull every record you have on Thomas Walker. Every bank account, every property, every investment. I need to see everywhere money came from and everywhere it went. Because if Thomas was supporting 3 families on an electrician's salary and still managed to accumulate over $1 million, something doesn't add up. The attorney nodded slowly. I can do that. It will take some time to compile everything, but I can get you a complete financial picture. Good. In the meantime, I think the 3 of us, Diane, Linda, and I, need to meet in person. Without lawyers, without kids, just the 3 of us. We need to talk this through and figure out what's fair, regardless of what's legal. I agree, Linda said through the screen. I can fly to Chicago. When? As soon as possible, Diane said. Patricia, can you and Emma stay a few more days? We'll stay as long as it takes, I said. We ended the video call with plans to reconvene in 3 days, after Mr. Whitmore compiled the financial records and Linda could arrange to fly to Chicago. Emma and I checked into a hotel near Diane's apartment. That night, lying in the hotel bed while Emma slept in the other bed, I finally let myself cry. Not just cry, I sobbed until I couldn't breathe, until my throat was raw and my eyes were swollen shut. I cried for the 32 years I'd spent believing I was married to a man I loved. I cried for the life I thought I'd built, the family I thought I had. I cried for Emma and Danny, who'd lost the father they'd believed in. I cried for Michael and Sarah, who'd never had a real father at all. I cried for Linda and her twins, who were going through the same shock and betrayal Emma and I were experiencing. But most of all, I cried for myself. For the 65-year-old woman who'd thought she knew her life, who'd thought she understood her story, only to discover that she'd been living in a carefully constructed fantasy. When the tears finally stopped, I lay in the darkness and thought about Thomas, about the man I'd thought he was, and the man he'd actually been. And I realized something. I had never really known him at all. The Thomas I'd loved had been a character he was playing, a role he'd inhabited when he was in Georgia. The real Thomas, whoever that was, had been someone else entirely. Someone capable of maintaining 3 separate lives, 3 separate identities for decades. Who does that? What kind of person compartmentalizes their life so completely that they can be a loving husband and father to 3 different families without any of them suspecting the truth? A sociopath, maybe. Or someone so damaged that they couldn't maintain a single authentic relationship. Or maybe just a coward. Someone who couldn't face the consequences of his choices. So he kept making new choices in new places with new people, stacking lies on top of lies until the whole structure should have collapsed under its own weight. But it hadn't collapsed. Not until his death forced it into the light. I thought about all the times I'd felt lucky to have found Thomas, to have been given a second chance at love after my disastrous first marriage. I'd thought he was my reward for surviving Richard's gambling and the hard years as a single mother. I'd thought God or fate or the universe had finally decided I deserved something good. Instead, I'd been chosen because I was vulnerable, because I had kids who needed a father, because I would be grateful enough not to ask too many questions. Thomas had selected me like you'd select a car or a house, based on practical considerations, not love. Had he loved any of us? Had he been capable of love at all? Or were we all just props in the elaborate performance of his life? I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. My mind kept spinning through memories, re-examining every moment of my marriage through this new lens. The way Thomas always kept his phone face down. The way he'd sometimes pause before answering questions about his past, like he was checking which version of his story he was supposed to be telling. The way he'd never wanted to take family vacations, always insisting we just do weekend trips close to home. The way he'd been so careful about keeping work and home separate, never inviting colleagues over, never attending company parties with me. All the signs had been there. I just hadn't seen them because I hadn't been looking for them. Why would I? You don't spend your marriage investigating your spouse. You trust them. You believe them when they tell you they love you. I'd believed Thomas. And that belief had been the biggest mistake of my life. Now, before I tell you what we discovered in those financial records, before I reveal the final, most shocking truth about Thomas's 3 lives, I need you to do something. If you're still with me, if you need to know how deep this betrayal went, then leave a comment below. Tell me, have you ever discovered something that made you question everything you thought you knew? Have you ever had to rebuild your entire understanding of your life? Because that's where I was, and I needed to know I wasn't alone. And don't forget to like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear this story. Your support means everything to Family Tales. 3 days later, the 3 wives of Thomas Walker sat around Diane's kitchen table with Mr. Whitmore on speakerphone, and a mountain of financial documents spread out before us. Linda had arrived the previous evening, a quiet, dignified woman with warm eyes and a shell-shocked expression that probably mirrored my own. We'd hugged when we met, this strange solidarity between women who'd shared a husband without knowing it. Before we go through these records, Mr. Whitmore said through the phone, I need to warn you that what you're about to see is extensive and disturbing. Mr. Walker's financial life was as compartmentalized as his personal life, but it was also much larger than any of you probably realized. Just tell us, Linda said. We can handle it. All right. Let's start with income. Thomas Walker was an electrician, as you all know. But he wasn't just doing regular electrical work. He was running his own contracting company under 3 different names in 3 different states. Walker Electric in Georgia, Walker & Sons in Texas, and Reliable Electric in Illinois. Walker & Sons? Marcus's voice came through. Linda had him on another phone listening in. But I thought he just worked for a company. He told me he worked for a big electrical firm. Now, before I tell you what we discovered in those financial records, before I reveal the final, most shocking truth about Thomas's 3 lives, I need you to do something. If you're still with me, if you need to know how deep this betrayal went, then leave a comment below. Tell me, have you ever discovered something that made you question everything you thought you knew? Have you ever had to rebuild your entire understanding of your life? Because that's where I was, and I needed to know I wasn't alone. And don't forget to like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear this story. Your support means everything to Family Tales. 3 days later, the 3 wives of Thomas Walker sat around Diane's kitchen table with Mr. Whitmore on speakerphone, and a mountain of financial documents spread out before us. Linda had arrived the previous evening, a quiet, dignified woman with warm eyes and a shell-shocked expression that probably mirrored my own. We'd hugged when we met, this strange solidarity between women who'd shared a husband without knowing it. Before we go through these records, Mr. Whitmore said through the phone, I need to warn you that what you're about to see is extensive and disturbing. Mr. Walker's financial life was as compartmentalized as his personal life, but it was also much larger than any of you probably realized. Just tell us, Linda said. We can handle it. All right. Let's start with income. Thomas Walker was an electrician, as you all know. But he wasn't just doing regular electrical work. He was running his own contracting company under 3 different names in 3 different states. Walker Electric in Georgia, Walker & Sons in Texas, and Reliable Electric in Illinois. Walker & Sons? Marcus's voice came through. Linda had him on another phone listening in. But I thought he just worked for a company. He told me he worked for a big electrical firm. I think I know, Sarah said quietly. She'd been reading through a stack of papers, and now held up a document. Look at this. It's a letter from Dad to his attorney, a different attorney, not Mr. Whitmore, dated 5 years ago. He's discussing his exit strategy. She began reading aloud. I know this can't continue forever. Eventually, someone will discover the truth. When that happens, I need to be ready. I need enough money saved that I can disappear if necessary. Start fresh somewhere new. Maybe overseas where extradition is difficult. I also need to ensure that if the worst happens, my families won't be left with nothing. That's why I'm setting up these trusts. Trusts? I interrupted. What trusts? Mr. Whitmore cleared his throat. That's actually what I was going to explain next. Thomas set up 3 separate trusts, one for each family. Each trust contains approximately $250,000 and was designed to be released upon his death, or if he disappeared for more than 6 months. So he had an escape plan, Linda said. If we ever figured out the truth, he was just going to vanish and leave us each with $250,000 as, what? Compensation. Apparently yes. That's insane, Emma said. He was planning for the possibility that his lies would be exposed, and his solution was to just run away and hope money would make up for it. There's more, Mr. Whitmore said. The trusts were funded by money he'd been skimming from all 3 businesses over the years. Money that should have been reported as income but wasn't. Thomas Walker was engaged in significant tax fraud across 3 states. The room went silent. How much tax fraud are we talking about? I finally asked. Conservatively? He probably owes the IRS somewhere in the neighborhood of $300,000 to $400,000 in back taxes and penalties. Possibly more once they complete a full audit. I think I know, Sarah said quietly. She'd been reading through a stack of papers, and now held up a document. Look at this. It's a letter from Dad to his attorney, a different attorney, not Mr. Whitmore, dated 5 years ago. He's discussing his exit strategy. She began reading aloud. I know this can't continue forever. Eventually, someone will discover the truth. When that happens, I need to be ready. I need enough money saved that I can disappear if necessary. Start fresh somewhere new. Maybe overseas where extradition is difficult. I also need to ensure that if the worst happens, my families won't be left with nothing. That's why I'm setting up these trusts. Trusts? I interrupted. What trusts? Mr. Whitmore cleared his throat. That's actually what I was going to explain next. Thomas set up 3 separate trusts, one for each family. Each trust contains approximately $250,000 and was designed to be released upon his death, or if he disappeared for more than 6 months. So he had an escape plan, Linda said. If we ever figured out the truth, he was just going to vanish and leave us each with $250,000 as, what? Compensation. Apparently yes. That's insane, Emma said. He was planning for the possibility that his lies would be exposed, and his solution was to just run away and hope money would make up for it. There's more, Mr. Whitmore said. The trusts were funded by money he'd been skimming from all 3 businesses over the years. Money that should have been reported as income but wasn't. Thomas Walker was engaged in significant tax fraud across 3 states. The room went silent. How much tax fraud are we talking about? I finally asked. Conservatively? He probably owes the IRS somewhere in the neighborhood of $300,000 to $400,000 in back taxes and penalties. Possibly more once they complete a full audit. So the estate that's supposedly worth $1.2 million, Michael said slowly, is actually worth, what? After taxes and penalties. Maybe half that. And that's if we're lucky. If the IRS determines the fraud was deliberate, which it clearly was, they could levy additional penalties that would consume even more of the estate. What about the houses? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. My house in Savannah. Linda's house in Texas. Are we going to lose them? The IRS has the authority to place liens on properties to collect unpaid taxes. So it's possible, yes. Linda started crying. I've lived in that house for 24 years. My kids grew up there. All their memories are there. And you're telling me the IRS might take it because Thomas was a tax cheat on top of being a bigamist? I'm telling you it's a possibility we need to prepare for. This is unbelievable, Marcus said through the phone. Our father left us with nothing but problems. Worse than nothing. He left us with debt and legal trouble and a financial mess that could take years to sort out. There is one piece of good news, Mr. Whitmore said. The 3 trusts he set up for you, those were funded separately and structured in a way that should protect them from estate taxes and IRS claims. So each family should receive their $250,000 regardless of what happens to the rest of the estate. $250,000 split how many ways? Michael asked bitterly. In my family that's 3 ways, Mom, Sarah, and me. That's about $83,000 each. That doesn't even cover what Dad stole from us in lost time and support. For my family it's 4 ways, Emma added. Mom, me, Danny, and Danny's share would probably be split with his wife. Maybe $60,000 each if we're lucky. Same for us, Linda said. 4 ways. $250,000 is a lot of money, but it's not enough to rebuild lives that were built on lies. We spent the next several hours going through more documents. The full picture of Thomas's financial life was breathtaking in its complexity and deception. He'd been running 3 businesses, supporting 3 families, investing in real estate in 4 different states, and somehow keeping all of it separate and secret. But there was one more piece of the puzzle we hadn't found yet. Mr. Whitmore, I said. You mentioned Thomas had an escape plan. You said he was considering starting fresh overseas if necessary. Did he ever actually set that plan in motion? Did he have properties or accounts in other countries? There was a long pause. I found some unusual transactions. Large sums being transferred to a bank in the Cayman Islands. Always in cash, always structured to avoid reporting requirements. Over the past 10 years, approximately $300,000 was moved offshore. $300,000? Diane's voice was sharp. Where is that money now? That's the question. The Cayman account exists, but I can't access it without proper authorization. And the authorization is tied to a name that isn't Thomas Walker. What name? James Morrison. It appears to be another identity Thomas created. Possibly the one he was planning to use if he needed to disappear. The implications hung in the air. Thomas hadn't just been maintaining 3 families. He'd been preparing a 4th identity, a complete escape hatch if everything fell apart. Was he planning to leave us? I asked. All of us. Was he building toward the day when he'd just vanish and become someone else entirely? I think he was keeping that option open, Mr. Whitmore said carefully. From what I can tell, the James Morrison identity was fully developed. Passport, driver's license, credit cards, the whole package. He could have disappeared at any time. But he didn't, Sarah pointed out. He died first. So what happens to that money in the Cayman Islands? That's complicated. Without knowing the account details, or having the authorization to access it, that money might be stuck there indefinitely. Or it might eventually be claimed by the Cayman government as abandoned assets. So we can't touch it, Michael said. Not without significantly more information, and possibly not even then. Another dead end. Another piece of Thomas's life that remained locked away from us. Emma had been quiet for a while, reading through a different stack of papers. Now she looked up, her face pale. Mom, you need to see this. She handed me a document. A life insurance application dated 6 months before Thomas's death. It was for a policy worth $2 million, with the beneficiary listed as James Morrison. He was going to fake his death, Emma said. Look at the date. This was taken out just a few months ago. I think he was planning to disappear, fake his death, and collect this insurance money under his fake identity. That's impossible, Linda said. You can't collect life insurance on yourself if you fake your death. You can if you have someone helping you, Emma replied. Someone who knows about the fake identity, someone who could claim the body and verify the death under the right name. But he had a real heart attack, I protested. We have death certificates. He really died. Yes, but what if that was a lucky accident for him? What if he'd been planning this for months, setting up the fake identity and the insurance policy, and then he actually died before he could execute the plan? Mr. Whitmore was silent for a long moment. Then, the insurance company would need to investigate this. If they determined there was intent to commit fraud, they could void the policy entirely. Good, Michael said harshly. I hope they do. I hope every fraudulent dollar my father tried to hide gets clawed back and used to pay his debts. He doesn't deserve to have any legacy except the mess he created. Michael, Diane said softly. He was still your father. Was he? Michael shot back. Because fathers don't abandon their children. Fathers don't lie to everyone they claim to love. Fathers don't build exit strategies in case their families discover the truth. Thomas Walker was a lot of things, but he wasn't a father. Not to me. The pain in his voice was raw, devastating. Sarah reached out and took his hand, tears streaming down her face. He wasn't a husband either, I said quietly. Not to any of us. Because you can't be a real husband while lying about everything. Marriage requires honesty, trust, vulnerability. Thomas gave us none of those things. So what do we do now? Linda asked. We're sitting here with a financial mess, legal problems, trust issues, and 3 families worth of trauma. How do we move forward? We start by being honest with each other, Diane said. No more secrets, no more lies. Even if the truth is painful. Okay, I said. Then I'll start. I'm angry. I'm furious at Thomas for wasting 32 years of my life. But I'm also angry at myself for not seeing the signs, for being so trusting, for believing everything he told me without question. I'm angry too, Linda added. And I'm scared. Scared of losing my house. Scared of how this will affect my kids. Scared that I'll never trust anyone again. I'm bitter, Michael said. Bitter that he chose other families over us. Bitter that he got to die peacefully instead of facing consequences. Bitter that we're left cleaning up his mess. One by one, we went around the table, each person sharing their feelings. It was raw, painful, cathartic. For hours we talked, about Thomas, about our lives with him, about the moments we should have questioned but didn't. And slowly, through all that pain and anger, something unexpected began to emerge. Solidarity. We were all victims of the same man's deception. We all loved him in our own ways. We all felt betrayed. And somehow, that shared experience began to forge a strange kind of bond between us. I have an idea, Sarah said after we'd all exhausted ourselves talking. About the estate, about the money, about all of it. What? I asked. What if we don't fight? What if instead of letting lawyers and courts divide everything up, we figure it out ourselves? We split everything evenly, the trusts, whatever's left of the estate after taxes, all of it. 11 people total, 3 wives, 8 children. We each get an equal share, regardless of what's legal or what Dad intended. That's incredibly generous, Emma said. But are you sure? Your mom is the only legal wife. She could take everything and none of us could stop her. I don't want everything, Diane said firmly. Sarah's right. We split it evenly. That's fair. What about the houses? Linda asked. Patricia's house in Savannah and mine in Texas? We protect those first, Sarah said. Before anything else gets divided, we make sure you two don't lose your homes. If that means using money from the estate to pay off the IRS or to buy out any claims, that's what we do. Then whatever's left, we split evenly. That could mean some people get nothing, Michael pointed out. If the debts are big enough, there might not be anything left to split after protecting the houses. Then we all get nothing together, Sarah replied. But at least nobody ends up homeless. At least we do the right thing, which is more than Dad ever did. I looked around the table at these people, my accidental family, brought together by lies but choosing honesty. Choosing each other over money, over legal rights, over justified bitterness. I agree, I said. Let's do it Sarah's way. Let's be better than Thomas was. One by one, everyone agreed. Even Michael, despite his anger, nodded his consent. Mr. Whitmore was silent for a moment after we explained our decision. Then he said, "This is highly unusual, and I'll need to draft some very specific agreements to make it work. But I think it's admirable. I think Thomas Walker doesn't deserve the family he had, but I'm glad you all have each other now." We spent the rest of the day hashing out details. Emma and Danny flew in. Marcus and Maria drove from San Antonio. Michael's girlfriend came by, and Sarah's husband joined us. We ordered pizza and sat around Diane's small apartment, 11 people connected by one man's deception, choosing to move forward together. And that's when someone knocked on the door. Diane answered it, and there stood a woman I'd never seen before. She was probably in her 50s, with dark hair and a nervous expression. "I'm looking for Patricia Walker," she said. "That's me," I said, standing up. The woman's eyes filled with tears. "My name is Jennifer Hayes. I'm Thomas Walker's daughter. His daughter from before he married anyone." The room went completely silent. "I saw the obituary," Jennifer continued, her voice shaking. I saw all the names listed, his wives, his children. And I realized none of you know about me. None of you know that before Thomas Walker was a bigamist with 3 families, he abandoned a 4th family. My mother and me. I'm his first child. And I think it's time someone told you the truth about who Thomas Walker really was. Jennifer Hayes sat in Diane's living room, surrounded by Thomas Walker's 3 wives and 8 acknowledged children, and began telling us about the man we thought we knew. My mother's name was Rebecca Hayes, Jennifer began, her hands trembling as she held a cup of tea Diane had made her. She met Thomas in 1972, when she was 18, and he was 19. They were both working at a factory in Louisville, Kentucky. She got pregnant. Thomas promised to marry her, to take care of us. But when I was born in 1973, he panicked. He was 20 years old, broke, and terrified of being trapped. So he left. Left how? Sarah asked softly. Just disappeared. One day he was there, promising my mother everything would be okay, and the next day he was gone. No note, no explanation, nothing. Mom tried to find him. She called his friends, his family, anyone who might know where he'd gone. But it was like he'd vanished into thin air. Did she ever find him? I asked. Not until much later. By then, I was 20 years old and Mom had terminal cancer. She was dying and wanted to find Thomas one last time, to let him know he had a daughter. She hired an investigator, spent money she didn't have, and found him in Georgia. Married to you, Patricia, raising your kids as his own. My heart clenched. What did she do? She wrote him a letter. Told him she was dying, told him about me, asked if he'd at least meet his daughter before she passed away. And do you know what he did? We all shook our heads, though I think we already knew the answer. Nothing. He never responded. Mom died 6 months later without ever seeing him again. I was 20 years old, trying to handle my mother's death, and I was so angry at this man who'd abandoned us. So I did some digging, and I found out about Diane, about the children in Chicago. I realized Thomas had left my mother, and then immediately started another family, like we'd never existed. Why didn't you come forward? Michael asked. Why didn't you expose him? Because I was 20 years old, grieving, and broke. What was I going to do? Hire a lawyer? Take him to court? For what? Back child support he'd never paid. I had no resources, no support, no idea how to fight someone who was clearly good at hiding. So I just let it go. I moved on with my life, tried to forget about Thomas Walker and the fact that my father had erased me from his story. But you're here now, Emma said. After all these years. Why? Jennifer pulled out a folded newspaper clipping, Thomas's obituary. I saw this in the paper. I'd set up a Google alert years ago, I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to know when he died, so I could feel some sense of closure. And when I saw the obituary, I saw all of you listed, 3 wives, 8 children, like he was some kind of beloved family man. And I thought, these people have no idea who he really was. They don't know that before he became a bigamist, he was a deadbeat dad. They don't know that his pattern of abandonment started with me and my mother. I'm so sorry, I said, tears streaming down my face. I'm so sorry for what he did to you and your mother. You deserved better. She deserved better. We all deserved better, Jennifer said, looking around the room. That's why I'm here. I saw in the obituary that there was going to be an estate settlement, and I thought, I don't want money. I don't want anything from him. But I want you all to know the truth. I want you to know that Thomas Walker spent his entire adult life running from responsibility, creating new families when the old ones became inconvenient, and never once taking accountability for the damage he caused. You said you don't want money, Mr. Whitmore's voice came through the speaker. We'd kept him on the line. But legally, as his biological daughter, you have as much right to his estate as any of his other children. I don't care about legal rights. I don't want his money. I just wanted you all to know that I exist, that my mother existed, that we were his first victims. Diane stood up and walked over to Jennifer, pulling her into a tight embrace. You're not just a victim. You're family. And if we're splitting everything evenly between Thomas's children, that includes you. You're his oldest child. You belong in this family as much as any of us. Jennifer broke down sobbing in Diane's arms. I never had a family. It was just me and Mom, and then just me. I don't even know what having a family feels like. Well, now you have a very large, very complicated, very angry family, Michael said with a grim smile. Welcome to the chaos. Over the next hour, we learned more about Jennifer. She'd become a nurse working in hospice care. I help people die with dignity, which is something my mother didn't get, she said. She'd never married, never had children. I was always afraid I'd mess it up like Thomas did. She'd spent 40 years carrying the weight of abandonment, building a life alone, never feeling like she belonged anywhere. We're changing that, Sarah declared. Right now. You're part of this family. You get a share of whatever's left of the estate, and you get access to all of us, siblings, nieces, nephews, the whole package. That means we're splitting 12 ways now, Emma calculated. 3 wives, 9 children. Actually, Linda said slowly, I don't think the wives should get shares. We had Thomas in our lives for better or worse. We got to be married to him, even if those marriages were lies. But Jennifer never got a father. None of the children really got a consistent, honest father. The money should go to them, split 9 ways. I agree, I said immediately. Diane nodded. That's incredibly generous, Mr. Whitmore said. Are you all certain about this? The 3 wives looked at each other. 3 women who'd loved the same man, been betrayed by the same man, and now were choosing to honor his children over themselves. We're certain, Diane said firmly. Mr. Whitmore promised to draw up the paperwork reflecting our decision. After the call ended, we ordered more food and spent the evening getting to know Jennifer. She showed us pictures of her mother, a beautiful young woman with sad eyes. She told us stories about growing up without a father, about the questions from teachers and classmates she never knew how to answer, about the profound loneliness of being abandoned. Did you ever try to find half-siblings? Marcus asked. Did you know about us? I knew about Michael and Sarah from my investigating, but I didn't reach out because, I don't know, I was angry. I felt like Thomas had chosen you over me, and I resented you for having a father at all, even a part-time one. It wasn't fair to you, but I couldn't help how I felt. I get it, Michael said. I've spent most of my adult life resenting Emma and Danny for the same reason. Resenting that Dad chose to be a real father to them when he'd barely acknowledged Sarah and me. But he wasn't a real father to any of us, Danny said quietly. He'd been mostly silent throughout the evening, processing everything. He was playing a role he thought Emma and I needed. But it wasn't authentic. Every moment he spent being a good dad to us was built on lies. So maybe you didn't miss out on as much as you think, Michael. Maybe not, Michael conceded. But at least you got the performance. I got abandoned. And I got erased, Jennifer added. Never acknowledged, never claimed, just forgotten. We sat with that for a moment. 9 children of Thomas Walker, each with their own flavor of abandonment and betrayal. I think, Sarah said thoughtfully, that Dad was incapable of real relationships. He could perform them, he could act like a husband or a father, but he couldn't actually be those things. Because being those things requires vulnerability, honesty, showing up as your authentic self. And Thomas Walker never had an authentic self. He was just a collection of performances, each one tailored to a different audience. That's terrifying, Emma said. To think we lived with someone like that. Someone who was essentially hollow inside. I don't think he was hollow, I said slowly, working through my thoughts. I think he was broken. Somewhere early in his life, maybe before Jennifer was even born, something happened that made him believe he couldn't be loved as himself. So he became whatever people needed him to be. To Rebecca, he was the promising young man who'd take care of her. To Diane, he was the ambitious husband building a future. To me, he was the steady, reliable second chance. To Linda, he was probably something else entirely. A fresh start, Linda said softly. He told me he'd spent his whole life searching for where he belonged, and he'd finally found it with me in Texas. I believed him because I wanted to believe that someone could choose me, could see me as their destination instead of just a stopover. But we were all stopovers, Diane said. None of us were his destination because he didn't have one. He was just running, always running, from one place to another, one identity to another, never stopping long enough to face himself. Do you think he ever wanted to stop? Maria asked. Do you think there was ever a moment when he thought about telling the truth, facing the consequences, trying to build something real? We were all quiet, considering this. Had Thomas ever wanted to stop running? Had he ever been tempted to confess everything, to risk rejection in exchange for authenticity? I think he thought about it, I said finally. There were moments, I can see them now in hindsight, when he seemed on the verge of saying something important. Times when he'd look at me with such sadness in his eyes, like he was carrying an impossible weight. But he never did it. He never took that leap. Because he was a coward, Michael said bluntly. He was afraid we'd hate him, so he just kept lying until he died. He was right to be afraid, Jennifer said. I do hate him. He destroyed my mother's life, abandoned me, created this web of lies that hurt everyone who touched it. Why shouldn't I hate him? You should, Sarah said gently. You have every right to hate him. We all do. But I think we can hate what he did while also acknowledging that he was a deeply damaged person who never figured out how to be whole. That's too generous, Marcus objected. Plenty of people have damage and trauma. They don't solve it by becoming con artists and bigamists. No, but some of them do, Linda said. Some people's response to being broken is to break other people. I'm not saying we should forgive him. I'm not sure I ever can. But I think Sarah's right that we can acknowledge the complexity without excusing the harm. We talked long into the night, 9 children and 3 wives of Thomas Walker, processing decades of lies and trying to figure out how to move forward. At some point, someone suggested we order whiskey. At another point, someone put on music. By midnight, exhausted and emotionally wrung out, we were sprawled around Diane's apartment in various states of collapse. I can't believe this is my life now, Maria said with a slightly hysterical laugh. I woke up 3 days ago thinking I had a normal family. Now I have 3 mothers and 8 siblings I didn't know existed, and my father was apparently a criminal mastermind. Not that much of a mastermind, Emma pointed out. A real mastermind wouldn't have left such an obvious paper trail. Maybe he wanted to be caught, Danny suggested. Maybe on some level, he wanted all of this to come out so he wouldn't have to carry the secret anymore. Or maybe he just got sloppy in his old age, Michael countered. Maybe keeping track of 3 lives became too much, and he started making mistakes. Does it matter? I asked. He's dead. His motivations are dead with him. All we have is the aftermath, this room full of people he hurt, trying to figure out how to heal. How do we heal from something like this? Marcus asked. How do we trust anyone again when the person we should have been able to trust most turned out to be completely false? Slowly, Diane said. Carefully. Maybe with the help of some very patient therapists. And with each other, Jennifer added. Maybe we help each other heal. Maybe that's the one good thing that can come from all of this. We found each other. Found each other, Sarah repeated. That's one way to put it. We got smashed together by the wreckage of our father's lies, and somehow have to figure out how to be a family. Do we want to be a family? Michael asked. I mean, really? Are we going to stay in touch after all this gets settled? Or are we going to take our shares of whatever's left and go back to our separate lives? The question hung in the air. Were we a family? Could we be, given the circumstances that brought us together? I don't know about everyone else, I said carefully. But I don't want to lose this. As terrible as the situation is, meeting all of you has been, I don't know, important. I feel like I understand my life better now, even though it hurts more. I want to stay connected too, Emma agreed. These are my siblings. Half-siblings, but still. I've always wanted a big family. Same, Maria said. Marcus and I only had each other. Now we have 7 more siblings. One by one, everyone agreed. Despite everything, despite the pain and anger and betrayal, we wanted to stay connected. We wanted to be a family, not because of Thomas, but in spite of him. Over the next several weeks, we worked with Mr. Whitmore to sort through the legal and financial mess. The IRS audit took months, but eventually, they reached a settlement. Thomas's estate owed approximately $380,000 in back taxes and penalties. After selling the rental property in Chicago and liquidating various investments, there was enough to pay the IRS, settle the mortgages on mine and Linda's houses to protect them from liens, and divide what remained. Each of Thomas's 9 children received $47,000. Not life-changing money, but enough to help with debts, down payments, or education expenses. The 3 wives received nothing from the estate, as we'd agreed. But something more valuable than money emerged from the wreckage: connection. Diane, Linda, and I began meeting monthly, sometimes in person, sometimes over video chat. We called ourselves the Survivors Club, joking that we'd survived Thomas Walker and come out stronger. We discovered we actually liked each other, that we had more in common than just a shared husband. Diane and I both loved historical fiction. Linda and I shared a passion for gardening. All 3 of us had developed a dark sense of humor about our situation that helped us process the absurdity of it all. The 9 children created a group chat they named Walker's Wreckage, and stayed in constant contact. Michael and Emma discovered they were both passionate about social justice issues and started collaborating on volunteer projects. Sarah and Danny connected over their experiences with mental health struggles. Hers from feeling abandoned by her father, his from PTSD. Jennifer slowly came out of her shell, discovering what it felt like to have siblings for the first time in her 50-something years. We gathered for holidays, all 12 of us, plus spouses and grandchildren. These gatherings were chaotic, loud, and sometimes emotional, but they were real in a way our separate lives with Thomas had never been. The first Christmas after Thomas's death, we met at a rented cabin in the mountains, neutral territory, since none of us wanted to host such a large group in our homes. There were 23 of us total when you counted spouses and grandchildren. We cooked together, shared stories, and slowly began building a new family narrative, one based on truth instead of lies. On Christmas Eve, after the younger children had gone to bed, the 9 siblings and 3 wives sat around the fireplace. Jennifer pulled out something she'd been carrying in her purse, an old photograph of her mother, pregnant with her, standing next to a very young Thomas. "This is the only picture I have of them together," Jennifer said. "Mom kept it even after he left. I've looked at this picture 1,000 times, trying to understand why he ran. And I think I finally figured it out." "Why?" Sarah asked. "Because he was just a kid. Look at him, he's what, 19? 20? He looks terrified. I think he ran because he was scared, and then he kept running because he didn't know how to stop. Each time he ran, it got easier. Each time he started over, he got better at it. Until eventually, running and restarting became his entire identity." "That doesn't excuse what he did," Michael said, but his voice was softer than it had been months ago. "No, it doesn't. But I think I'm finally ready to stop letting what he did define my entire life. I've spent 50 years being the daughter Thomas Walker abandoned. I think I'm ready to be something else. Someone else." "Who do you want to be?" I asked. "Jennifer Hayes, hospice nurse," she said with a small smile. "Who happens to have 8 siblings and 3 bonus moms. Who belongs to a big, weird, wonderful family that chose each other." "I like that," Danny said. "We all get to choose who we are now. We're not defined by what Dad did anymore." "Or by what he didn't do," Emma added. "We're defined by what we're choosing to build together." We raised our glasses in a toast, to survival, to truth, to the family we were creating from the ashes of the family Thomas had destroyed. It's been 2 years now since I first discovered the truth about Thomas Walker. 2 years since I knocked on Diane Martinez's door in Chicago, and my entire life crumbled, and then slowly reassembled into something new. I'm 73 years old now. My hair is whiter, my face has more lines, but I feel stronger than I did at 71. Stronger because I know the truth. Stronger because I survived the truth. Stronger because I'm not alone in the aftermath. Emma and Danny have both been in therapy, working through their feelings about the father they thought they knew. Emma told me recently that she stopped trying to figure out which moments with Thomas were real, and which were performance. "I'm just accepting that all of it was real to me," she said. "My experience of having a dad who showed up, who cared, who was there, that was real, even if his motivations were complicated." Danny has been less forgiving. He's angry that Thomas used our family as a redemption project, A way to prove he could be a good father after failing Michael and Sarah and Jennifer. We were his do-over, Danny said. His second chance to get it right. But you don't get to practice on people. You don't get to fail with some kids, and then succeed with others like it's no big deal. Both perspectives are valid. Both are part of the complicated truth of loving someone who was fundamentally dishonest. As for me, I've stopped trying to understand Thomas. I've stopped asking myself why he did what he did, whether he loved me, whether any of it meant anything. Those questions have no answers, or at least none that I can reach. Thomas took his truth to the grave, and I've made peace with never really knowing him. What I do know is this. I spent 32 years married to a stranger. It hurt. It still hurts. But from that hurt, I gained 8 additional children, 2 sister wives who've become genuine friends, and a deeper understanding of human complexity. I've learned that people are capable of extraordinary compartmentalization, that someone can be genuinely kind in one context and devastatingly cruel in another. I've learned that love doesn't always mean truth, that you can care for someone deeply while lying to them constantly. I've learned that the person sleeping beside you for decades might be unknowable, but I've also learned about resilience, mine and others. I've learned that women who could have been enemies can choose to be allies. I've learned that children of the same father can build bonds stronger than shared DNA. I've learned that family isn't always about blood or legality. Sometimes it's about who shows up in the aftermath and chooses to stay. The house in Savannah is still mine. We paid off the mortgage with money from Thomas's estate, so I own it free and clear now. Sometimes I think about selling it, starting fresh somewhere without memories of Thomas in every room. But Emma and Danny convinced me to keep it. It's not Dad's house, Emma said. It's the house where we grew up, where you raised us, where your grandchildren come to visit. Don't let him take that from you. So I stayed. But I redecorated. I painted the walls new colors, rearranged the furniture, turned Thomas's office into a craft room. I made the house mine in a way it never was when he was alive. Linda did the same with her house in Texas. Diane sold her apartment in Chicago and bought a small house in the suburbs, something that was entirely hers. All 3 of us are rebuilding our lives, creating spaces that reflect who we are rather than who Thomas needed us to be. We get together 4 times a year, all 12 of US plus families. It's become a tradition, this gathering of Thomas Walker's complicated legacy. We rotate locations, Georgia, Texas, Illinois, and various vacation spots. We've been to the Grand Canyon, to Yellowstone, to the beaches in Florida. We travel together, this unlikely family, and slowly we're building memories that have nothing to do with Thomas. At our most recent gathering, a week-long rental house on the Oregon coast, Jennifer pulled me aside after dinner one night. "I want to thank you," she said. "For what?" "For being angry enough to search for answers. If you hadn't gone to Chicago, if you hadn't knocked on Diane's door, none of this would have happened. I'd still be alone, thinking I was the only person Thomas had ever hurt. But because you were brave enough to face the truth, I found a family." "I wasn't brave," I said. "I was just desperate for answers." "Same thing sometimes," Jennifer replied with a smile. "She's right, I suppose. Sometimes bravery and desperation are indistinguishable. Sometimes you don't seek truth because you're strong. You seek it because the lies have become unbearable. I still think about Thomas sometimes. I dream about him occasionally, dreams where I confront him, demand explanations, make him face what he did. In these dreams, he always has an explanation that almost makes sense. But then I wake up and remember that real Thomas never had to explain, never had to face us, never had to reconcile the different versions of himself. Do I forgive him? I'm not sure forgiveness is the right word. I've released him, maybe. I've stopped giving him power over my present and future. I've stopped defining myself as Thomas Walker's widow, or the woman he deceived. I'm just Patricia now. A woman who survived something terrible, and came out the other side changed but not broken. The money he sent to Diane every month, that $500 that was actually $1,000, skimmed from both me and Linda, turned out to be the thread that unraveled everything. If he'd just been honest about his first marriage, if he'd divorced Diane properly before marrying me, none of this would have happened. But Thomas Walker was incapable of that kind of honesty. He preferred complexity over truth, performance over authenticity, constant reinvention over genuine connection. In a strange way, I pity him. What a lonely existence, to never be fully known by anyone. To live your entire life in compartments, never integrating your different selves into something whole. To die having never experienced the freedom of being completely honest with another person. That's what I have now that Thomas never had. Honesty. Messy, painful, complicated honesty. With Diane and Linda. With my children and stepchildren and bonus children. With myself. We tell each other the truth, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Michael is getting married next spring. He's marrying a wonderful woman named Tasha who knows the whole story and loves him anyway. He's asked all 8 of his siblings to be in the wedding party, and he's asked all 3 of Thomas's wives to be seated together in the front row. I want everyone there, he told me. I want the family we built, not the family Dad pretended we were. And I want Dad's empty seat to be visible. I want everyone to see what he missed by living his life in hiding. I'll be there, in the front row between Diane and Linda, watching Michael marry Tasha. And I'll think about all the weddings Thomas attended, Emma's, Danny's, Sarah's, and all the ones he missed because he was maintaining his other lives. I'll think about what he sacrificed in pursuit of his elaborate deception. And then I'll let it go. Because this day isn't about Thomas. It's about Michael, who survived abandonment and became a good man anyway. It's about the family that emerged from Thomas's lies, choosing connection over bitterness. That's the lesson I've learned from all of this. You can't control what happens to you, but you can control what you build from the ruins. Thomas Walker broke a lot of people, but those broken people found each other, helped each other heal, and built something beautiful from the pieces. If you've stayed with me through this whole long story, thank you. Thank you for listening, for witnessing, for understanding that sometimes the truth is complicated and painful, and doesn't come with easy answers. If you're in a situation where you're questioning what you know, questioning whether the person you love is who they claim to be, trust your instincts. Ask the hard questions. Demand honesty, even when it's uncomfortable. Because living with a comfortable lie is worse than facing an uncomfortable truth. I know. I lived it for 32 years. And if you've discovered, as I did, that your life was built on deception, know this. You will survive. It won't feel like it at first. You'll feel like your entire reality has shattered. But slowly, piece by piece, you'll build something new. Something real. Something yours. Before I go, I want to ask you to do something for me. Subscribe to Family Tales if you haven't already. Share this story with someone who might need to hear it. Leave a comment telling me about your experience with secrets, whether you've kept them or discovered them. Because these stories matter. Your story matters. And none of us should have to carry these burdens alone. My name is Patricia, and I spent 32 years married to a man named Thomas Walker, who sent $500 every month to someone he said was his sister. When I finally met her in person, I discovered that everything I thought I knew about my life was a lie. But from that lie, I built something true. A family based on choice, not deception. Relationships based on honesty, not performance. A life that's mine, fully and completely mine, for the first time ever. Thomas Walker stole 32 years from me. But he didn't steal my future. That belongs to me. And to the beautiful, complicated, chosen family I've built from the wreckage of his lies. And you know what? I wouldn't trade them for anything. Not even for a marriage that had been true from the start. Because sometimes the best things in life come from the worst circumstances. Sometimes family isn't who you're born with or who you marry. It's who stays when everything falls apart. To Diane, Linda, Jennifer, Michael, Sarah, Emma, Danny, Marcus, and Maria. Thank you for staying. Thank you for choosing each other. And for choosing me. You're the family I needed, even though I never knew I needed you. And to Thomas, wherever you are, I hope you found peace. I hope you finally figured out how to stop running. But mostly, I hope you know that we're okay without you. We're more than okay. We're thriving. Because that's what survivors do. We survive. And then we thrive. Thank you for listening to my story. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and remember, the truth will set you free, even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. This is Patricia, signing off from Family Tales. Until next time.